Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And you know, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. All right, welcome Blue Collar Mystics, everybody out there. Super excited. I have an amazing guest today. And just before we jump into it, I just want to thank you all for watching this and remind you that sharing is caring. Share this out, send it to a friend. If something resonates with you, especially, leave us a comment. We appreciate all of that. Thank you so much for being a part of our realities as we're going to break that down. You know, want to thank my friends at Content Safe. They distribute this all over the internet. They're amazing. I appreciate those guys, and remind you guys too that we have right now the Blueprint to Happiness Guide, and my friend James Thomas, aka the Admiral Hits' 8-day mentalism course is coming along with that on us. I have today the one, the only Brian Scott. Thank you so much for being here, my friend. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on, Owen. It's awesome to see you, man. How you doing?
Dude, it's been a while, maybe a couple of years since we've done something formal like this. It's nice.
I think you were like my first or second interview on my channel, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
It wasn't very many I had done when I talked to you, right?
Yeah, no, but I was so excited, and it was a great interview. And man, I mean, you've just been so productive and created so much since then and been such an inspiration. Thank you for everything that you're doing out there, dude. It's awesome.
Thanks, man. Thank you. As I've told you, like on a phone call, without you, there's no reality revolution. You totally inspired me with your readings and your work that you were doing back in the day when we were talking about shifting.
Yeah,
we you know, you showed me how to do it. I was just copying you. So,
well, I'm happy to see that you've really figured it out, and that's really cool. And I know you've inspired a lot of amazing other people too, and you have such a great community on Facebook with the Reality Revolution, and I'm really happy to be part of everything that you've been putting together. It's just insane how much you've been able to put out. And then I see your paintings and all this other stuff too that you're doing. It's incredible, man. I really appreciate it. It truly is inspiring.
yeah, I've never been happier. I'm in the groove. I'm in that flow. You know, it feels great to be doing something that feels like it has some importance, or at least I can help somebody. I love that feeling. I never knew that feeling before.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't realize that they can have it, right? Like it seems so unattainable to be able to live life in the pocket, or whatever you want to call it. You know, we've had a hard time like defining that, like blueprint to happiness. I don't know. Like that's like it sounds both specific and nebulous at the same time, you know, but that's kind of how it is. Everybody can live in their own little place where they really enjoy what they're doing and their soul feels fulfilled. It's totally possible, but we're so good at convincing ourselves that it's not.
More and more, I'm seeing people enter into that zone more and more. And I try to envision a world where everybody's in the zone like that. And I think it's possible. I know people listening are going to say, you know, that's not possible. There's always going to be war or conflict or poverty, or it's just how it is. I'm sorry, that's not true. You're wrong, man. You're absolutely wrong. It's just not true, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we have to start actively defining reality in order to really
Right.
create
We're
it.
living in somebody else has defined this reality for me,
That's right.
saying that only like 1 or 2% get to be in the flow, and everybody else has to struggle. And I'm sorry, but that's not the reality that I'm in now. I see it different, and it's changing before me every
It
day.
absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're seeing it as well. And the more people I think that also understand that once they apply that principle, it's mentality. It's truly like mentalism. It's because
Hmm.
you don't like people don't have the leverage over their own minds to be able to understand, oh, I can actually rebuild this structure. I can change the foundation of how I view the world and shift it, and then the
Hmm.
reality mirror is going to reflect that once I shift it in my belief system. But you have to do that first. Like you could
Hmm.
do all the work in the world and make and even proficient, excellent work. But if you don't believe that you deserve credit for it, if you don't believe that people are, it's worthy of people's time or what have you, you have that belief, that limiting belief, then you're never going to move past that. So until we understand that perspective and leverage of perspective is truly the thing that we need to start working with, it gets a lot easier as opposed to a lot harder, and it's really cool to see people doing it, such
Yeah.
as
And
yourself.
as you can report, because I know you've experienced this, you can make a difference. You putting up a video on YouTube, people contacting you on Messenger, you can actually start to see that you've made a difference, not just with 1 or 2 people. It sort of flows like a wave and it spreads out. You start to see little proof and your fingerprint starts to become a part of the things that you're trying to change. I know a lot of people have a belief that they can't change the world beyond just their own reality. And I know that that's not true. I can say from both of our it's
Experiences.
possible. We both seen it. I'm here to tell you that you can do it. You who's just sitting there in your apartment, you can change the world. You can change the world in so many different ways, not just by doing videos like this, but it's an amazing thing. We have this power, and we have no clue of how truly powerful we really are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we can't perceive it, right? We can't accept it because we
Right.
can't even believe that it exists. Because I think really most of our lives we're really kind of shoved to believe certain things about reality, even from young kids. I was talking to my friend Becky the other day. I actually got to meet the artist who made the logo for us, and she's made
Hmm.
tons of other really cool stuff. But she's awesome. But yeah, she was talking about just like exposing kids to this, and that so many people have said, when we're young, we see auras, we are able to, experience things on a more magical level and are tapped in, intuitively. And we're basically, over time, coaxed into letting go of a lot of those types of things as you've kind of like gotten back into experiencing intuition and things that are beyond the senses as far as knowing. What are some of the best practices that you have personally experienced as far as like following your own guide, inner compass?
What I've mostly found, I'm fascinated by it, making decisions, following your intuition. I'm fascinated by the idea that is there some system that I can follow or some way to do it, and really, there is no wrong decision. And it's and the most effective decision is the one that's made the quickest. A lot of times if we're spending a lot of time trying to decide or make a decision or think about something, and trusting our intuition is not there. It's already been there. It told us right at the very beginning. A lot of people think that they need to wait for their intuition, and it's not true. The intuition will usually tell you right away, immediately. And so I'm constantly reaching out, trying to grab on to the forward edge of my intuition, instead of and so that was, if I wait way back in the wake, a lot of times when you overthink things, you bring a part of yourself into the decision making. And something I had learned from studying, reality shifting, is that, sometimes the easiest option is usually the best. And when I'm kind of contemplating that, sometimes I will ask for guidance from my guides, and they're like, we can't. That's something you have to make a decision. My guides have reached a point with me. They don't want to violate my free will, though. They know that it's really important that I make the choice. My guides not tell me what to do. I think earlier when I started interacting with my guides, it was about, okay, this is what you need to do, and later, my decision making in the moment is super critical. At least that's where I'm at now. So I know that some people I've met or interviewed, they get guidance all the time, and then and they really depend on their guides a lot. Um, my guides just like to talk to me, but really, it's almost like I have a pre-incarnative decision that I don't. I want to be guided up to a certain point, and and a big thing I'm learning is how to follow the stream of intuition myself, and it's a really important part of what I'm learning. So it's a constant spiritual part of my journey is understanding this voice of intuition. I'm always more intuitive if I have at least some element of silence uh, during the week. If I can get, for a lot of people, and one of the things that I've tried to do with my channel is make meditation fun. But a lot of times they're listening to my meditation, right? Even beyond that, sitting in absolute silence is very informative and instructive because we really aren't listening. And I think that I have an episode I might have coming soon. Prayer is listening. We are a lot of times just praying and saying what we want and doing that, and then and the prayer is already there. And and imagine somebody telling you the secret to what you wanted to do, and then you just kind of ignore them because you're being so proactive. So I've gotten into that state before, and I would be guided, and I could hear the voice to tell me. All right, I'm sorry, man. When it's going good, sometimes we affect that.
Yeah, we have retrogrades going on too. But you were just talking about kind of getting into that state.
Right. There is a state where I'm in getting intuitive guidance, and there's a state beyond that where it's like you've already gotten our guidance. Now you need to go and follow and truly understand how to make that decision beyond just our guidance. And it's an interesting spiritual observation for me because a lot of times at the beginning it's okay. I want to listen to this guidance. So that's part of what I've been through. I don't know if you relate to that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, well, I think a lot of the things that we learn are tools to get us to the place where we're comfortable enough, we have a strong enough foundation where we can actually explore what we want. Because, like, for a long time, it's really hard to know. You know, you're like, just tell me
Yeah.
what to do. And it's like, but you can do whatever you want. But I'm like, but I don't know. Can I get some guidance?
Right.
But then I think at a certain point, you get to that place where it's you don't have to muscle test or
Right. There's
necessarily
no
ask a
need for
pendulum
guidance
or
when you're in
whatever.
that perfect spot, right? I
Yeah,
don't think you need the guidance. The guides are there to get you to that point, and they want to get you to that point of freedom
yeah,
where
I think that
whatever you choose to do is going to be perfect, right?
where emotionally you can handle stuff, right? to be
Hmm.
able to just flow into it and know like it's gonna be all right
Right.
regardless, right? It'll shift around and like you kind of said earlier, like that what needs to happen is gonna happen anyway. So why even
I
you
was
know
definitely intuitively guided when I told you my story where I somebody had shot at me, and I kind of woke up and was being guided in what to do. I think that there's like big moments that happen in our lives where we're being protected, and that guidance comes to the fore. So I think it's different depending on what we're being guided for,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. I love that. Yeah, I think that's very, very accurate. There's definitely some times where I think we probably all had in our lives where we're like, man, that was really too close. That was really too close, and that was divine. That was
And
divine
if
intervention.
oftentimes I believe, Frederick Dotson talks about this. I mentioned this in my book. We have a sort of soul level awareness of the multiverse. So we understand all the possible on an informational level in the alternative space, all the possible realities that are out there. And then if there's a reality where this happened and I died, or this happened and something terrible happened, I can sense I can sort of sense, my heart knows, okay, well, we've already experienced this in some other realities. Don't get on the train right now, because when you get on the train right now, it might be in an accident. There's times when you need to pull off right now, maybe get a hot dog because there's an accident up front. When you really are in the flow and sort of aware of those signals, then I'm super fascinated by that. I think there's something to that. I think we're still learning, right? Why is it so many people didn't go into the buildings on 9/11? Why is it that statistically there's always less people are in plane accidents and car accidents? I mean, in train accidents, right? Why is it statistically there's all these stories of people saying, I just got this, something just told me I'm not going to get on the train. What is going on there? There's something going on. Where's the awareness coming from? In my case, I do not think that's guidance. It's an awareness. If it is guidance, the guidance is to make you aware of your multiversal aspects. Because when we do, we have a sort of understanding, well, in this reality, if I do this, then
we'll do the best we can. I think we're doing all right, at least mostly. Little lag there, folks. Hang with us. Thanks for your patience, right? Like, yeah, so I'm actually really curious because you've come such a far way, and I mean, you're putting out so much content and reading so much. What where did things really start for you? Where did it really where did you start saying something is up here, something is different about my reality? I remember when you first started doing the podcast, you were really hungry and looking for, answers to really interesting questions and finding amazing guests such as Frederick Dodson. And I remember how awesome that interview was, that first Frederick Dodson interview.
Yeah.
And, but before that, even before you started the channel, what was it that kind of got you down this rabbit hole? What was the first thing that you can remember that got you kind of asking some spiritual questions within yourself?
Oddly, the very beginning would be all the way back when The Secret first came out. I think before I was exposed to the idea of my relationship to creating my reality of the law of it. And that is not, now that we can look back on that, it's sort of a third density basic understanding of how it works, but it was a great introduction for a lot of people, right?
Sure.
That's before that, my spiritual journey was more about, because I was got a master's in communication in college. I became I got certified in neurolinguistic programming, and a lot of my emphasis when I was going through college in that time was hypnosis and learning ways of communicating with people, because I was in sales. I was all about myself in a dark period, but still a very educative period where I learned the power of my language when I was selling mortgages, and even big dollar money later, when I started really getting into sales, and I could sell anything, and I could sell you a pencil for $20,000, right? And I knew the intricacies of using different forms of language in hypnosis. That was spiritual for me on the other scale. You know what I mean? Looking back on it, I went through that period of, I thought I was trying to understand my consciousness, but I wasn't. I was trying to understand my ability to control other people's consciousness. I haven't really talked about that. I think this is the first I've really mentioned it to you, but I got a lot of knowledge about how I was influenced and how my mind, I think even farther back, if I'm going to go to the beginning, maybe when I was in college, I was a policy debater. I know it's popular in Georgia, right? Like we would go to Georgia all the time for debate tournaments. Debate in college, policy debate it's this whole other world, almost like comedy. Like it's a other world, right? We didn't get up and speak persuasively. It wasn't like me trying to persuade you. We got up and spoke incredibly fast, and it was all about research. And so if I presented 20 arguments and oh man, are we back?
If you presented 20 arguments, yeah, I think we're back.
Right, where I was in a situation where I presented 20 arguments, and I answered those 20 and added 3 more. It was about who answered which arguments. And back then, we didn't have computers like we had to print them out, and we would walk around with these trolleys of file folders with evidence that we would cut out. We would sit in the library and cut out paragraphs and create arguments that kind of join together. So through this, I learned a way of researching something all out. We would get LexisNexis. You know what I'm talking about?
And I do remember LexisNexis.
I would go into a library and I would get all 2,000 articles on this thing, and I would read them all. I had to, because I had to learn to speed read, cut out the key elements. I would create arguments. We would show up at a tournament, and it was competitive. And the reason I was good at it is I was very, very fast. I would get up and I would speak so quickly, people could not get through all of it. And that it became spiritual because I applied this way of researching to my spirituality. So when I got into it, after I had this kind of foundational knowledge of neurolinguistic programming and the way that communication I started to see patterns in different religions and different things. So I was immediately able to disregard a number of different spiritual communities because I just saw manipulation occurring, right? So it allowed me to continue move forward and find some alternative ways of understanding and really expand. As you can see with my channel, it's become like I'm researching a debate topic. If I want to research Swedenborg, I'm going to read every single book, which, oh my God, is very difficult, that he's ever written. And I need to, and the critics too, because in debate, we had to take both sides, right? So I would talk about I would have the other side complete. If I want to get up and argue against you on the same thing, I was not taking it. My personality was not inside that argument. I could take either argument and argue. So it really allowed me on a spiritual level to come to an understanding of certain spiritual issues. It gave me the neutral observer authority over what I was researching. But another thing that I learned while I was in debate is how to speed read. It's one of the greatest gifts of things I've ever learned. Not reading fast with my mouth, but learning to read sentences at a time, paragraphs at a time. I can read a book very quickly. I still don't understand. I'm still amazed that I can do it. Sometimes I can, because I had an interview just before this, and I wanted to ask questions about it. I sat and read the book in about 20 minutes, and I still don't know how I was able to do that. It's one of the cool. I took a course when I was in college. They had a course that kind of taught it. It wasn't that hard, but it's really helped me because there's also the argument you can have too much information.
Right.
For some reason, I have this feeling in previous incarnations, it's been my emphasis. Like I'm an information spirit. It's part of my thing that I do is gather information. Almost like I'm some sort of researcher from another planet researching Earth. So even the movies are important, right? Even the fictional stories, it's all, sure. I'm gathering like an anthropologist, right?
Of course, yeah. It all rolls into like Joseph Campbell's work too, right? The idea
right.
of story and myth.
It's all right there, right?
Yeah. So it all links in. I can totally understand that. I think it's fascinating too. And, even from like Robert Anton Wilson's perspective, spoiler alert on
who I love so much. Yeah. We could sit and talk about him for the rest if you want, man.
We could.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to spoil, Prometheus Rising is basically saying, information, for lack of a better way to say it, is God. That's what we're, actually actively kind of seeking at the end of that book.
Right.
I guess it's relatively implied, or maybe even overtly stated. But I dumbed it down.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of why we're now. We do have this.
I'm definitely on that seventh circuit. When I'm in that information realm, right? So
yeah, and I think what's cool about that too is I think that totally correlates to the law of one stuff, right? Like as above, so below. You see this development within yourself, right? From these 7 or 8 circuits of consciousness, there's also the 8 densities as well, and we could look at
they totally relate.
Yeah, they're back right beside each other. It's like in the
and Wilson's concept of the reality tunnel is very informative and almost better than some other methodologies we both have shared. Mm-hmm. That we all sort of form our reality tunnel, and we see it now. Everybody in their own echo chamber. Everybody's in their own reality tunnels. Even the pendulum becomes like a uniform reality tunnel, right?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's its own sort of box or matrix, right?
One of
Like
the
there's
most fascinating things about Robert Anton Wilson, and you can find them if you search the internet, is when he was dying. When he was dying, he was recording these amazing video episodes, just talking about stuff. He had this amazing sense of humor, and just to hear him talk, knowing he's about to die and what he's going through, I thought it humanized him so much. He was such a fascinating person, kind of intercorrelated with Timothy Leary.
Yeah, in fact, he's Timothy Leary, I believe, is the one who discovered that eight circuit model. It's an
Hmm.
ancient model, I guess. It's from like it's ancient Greece, Greek stuff, And then they had this whole like they did Discordianism, this goofy religion, this fake religion that they did later on that
Right.
praised the goddess of Eris, which is a real goddess that's tied in, the goddess of chaos that's tied in with another myth that is very prominent. Sort of Joseph Campbell and Robert Bly have talked about. It's the myth of the golden ball and the Iron John myth. I don't know if
Right.
you're familiar with that, but like it's
The Iron
crazy.
John book is good. I read it.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's a thick one. It's good. But those things are all actually real and tied into each other. No, he did so
Right.
much work, but he took Timothy Leary's sort of discovery of those eight circuits, and while he was in jail, he created that book Prometheus Rising, and it really does such a good job of describing those developmental phases and going up into these higher realms of consciousness, and even doing a pretty damn good job of defining those too, as well
Yeah.
as possible.
I found Wilson oddly, because I went through a period where I was fascinated by Aleister Crowley.
Hmm.
And I was super interested with Aleister Crowley. I tried to write a screenplay when I was a screenwriter, and I got out. I tried to write a screenplay about Crowley, right? And I found Wilson talking about his relationship with Crowley. It was super fascinating, right?
That is wild. Yeah, that's super
Right.
interesting.
And he's talking about sex magic and stuff and
Sure.
all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So
I mean, he was such a curious guy. Back to
he
curious
was
people,
right.
like he was looking into Crowley and looking into all of these different things. Ulysses, James Joyce, and had some tremendous insight into that book.
Right.
Which, I mean, I guess you could probably explore that like you could Yellowstone National Park if you wanted. There's a lot to what some of these folks have left behind. It's pretty interesting. So you've read a lot of books, a lot.
Right.
And I love the older ones anyway, but would you maybe have sort of a favorite in some of these books that you've maybe something undiscovered or a
Are you
hidden gem?
talking about nonfiction in the spiritual realm?
I would say nonfiction, yeah, in the spiritual realm. But you're welcome to answer fiction books too. I'd be interested to know.
Um, it's a really tough question for me, because there's just so much, and it just seems like I'm always finding new stuff. But um, I'm still just touched when I read The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner and The Door to Everything by Ruby Nelson. They both had this sort of God-like voice, like God was speaking to me, and so since then, I've found other books from that, coming from that perspective, and it sort of changed. I think that those are evergreen. They feel timeless to me. Um, so I'm a big, in terms of most of what I've read is science fiction. I'm a huge science fiction fan, 'cause, um, comic books and that kind of thing. So I could just talk endlessly about that. And I found that in some fiction, there is just some spiritual lessons that can be learned in fiction too. But it's amazing the breadth of work in the field that we both teach that's been written about all the way back to like 1700. There's so many little William Walker Atkinson and so many amazing writers that have written so much more than people think. Everything that we're talking about now that we think is new, that we think is somewhat on the cutting edge, is not, has been talked about for hundreds of years. So it seems like every book that I read ends up being the new big one that I just read. That's um,
I love that. I think that's
you know what
great.
I'm saying? I can't
Yeah.
when I go back. I mean, I was deeply affected by Parallel Universes of Self by Frederick Dodson. And that book I read multiple times and listened to multiple times because something happened. That book lit up some part of my spirit that said, this is uniquely talking about what you're going to go through or going through now. It has information that's really important. Obviously, when you read my book, you can see how I was deeply influenced, but also Quantum Jumping by Cynthia Sue Larson is an amazing, she's coming from it as a physicist. It's the thing that bugs me about transurfing is a lot of it is lost in translation, and a lot of it is trying to make things sound more complicated than they are. Which after you've read it once, the first time, it's like, oh, I'm learning something new. And then it's like, oh, I guess I'm not really learning something new. They just made it seem like I went to medical school and added some new terms for me to memorize.
Sure.
Which you get a lot with that. You know what I'm saying? So Frederick Dotson made me feel like I think it's a masculine thing. I got to know why. The female perspective is I can just accept. I'm going to give birth to this. It's all good. But there's the masculine perspective is I need to know why this is happening. I need to know what is going on. I don't understand. I'm not going to just give faith to this. I need to know the dynamics, how the engine works. I need to know, right? And so understanding the multiversal aspects that I got from Cynthia Sue Larson and Frederick Dotson, it appealed to that masculine side of my knowing so that I could have more confidence that these techniques work, right? So
I'm a big fan of that too. Yeah, I love things that are, demonstratable, practical, usable, all of that stuff.
Right.
Like I want to be able to, use a wrench to adjust something in the sort of astral plane, you know what I'm saying? And be like, oh, okay, I see how that works. And
right.
It's a little bit more cartoony, but that's kind of how I interpret it, a lot of the stuff anyway. So I see a lot of the appeal in that, in the breakdown of stuff, and the sort of the having like an advanced a degree in metaphysics or something,
right.
But it's certainly not necessary. I mean, the idea really is very simple: feel good and choose. That's pretty much it. If
it can be boiled down to that, right?
Yeah. If I had to sum it up, it would be.
But there's still that part of you that wants to know why. Why do I got to feel good and choose? And that's why those authors appeal to me. Because when I feel good, I'm connecting to a reality where the good thing happens, and there's a string of events that can occur, and I can understand it. It makes more sense to us, right? Everything can be simplified. The most complicated thing, but I learned that through complexity from reading lots of books that have ultimately told me the same thing, and then seeing it in action. Everything can be simplified. It's not hard to learn, and there's multiple systems for us to learn it, and so.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's another thing too. I've been learning too is like, and we we read this as far as like, being truly individual and following your intuition and going your own sort of way. But there are so many paths to the top, to kind of bring it back to what we were earlier talking about, going forward and making these decisions. And it's like, well, it's 6 and 1 a lot of times, right? Like you're still moving toward the same thing. You're still focused on your goal, and it's going to happen. But it's like, how,
There is another book that I just thought of.
Oh, cool.
That John Whale, man.
I've never seen that book.
If you want to know the science of the plat.
Okay.
He has another book, and I'm trying to look and see if I have it. It's likely that I'd have to start going through stacks. He has another book that's just the science of the assemblage point.
Okay.
And it helps us to learn a lot about it's connected to the heart, because that's why the plat is felt in that area behind our back. Even though it's coming from the head, it's more about being connected to the heart. And they have instruments in that book of you can go around and you can find it. You can find where it is. Whoa. You can find the plat. And you understand it gives it's almost put it on the level of acupuncture science, type of meridian science.
Yeah.
And the way that the assemblage point changes, which is what the assemblage point is, just the same as the plat or this energy cord. So I recommend Naked Spirit by John Whale. His other one, which I'll email you if I find the name of it. I think you might find that.
How do you spell his last name?
Whale.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I'm looking him up right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
That
pretty
guy
cool.
has got all the research down on the assemblage point. And you will then totally understand the plot beyond anything else that you've read.
So I'm fascinated by that stuff actually right now too. It's funny you were like, oh, we could talk about Robert Anton Wilson, and we could. I could talk about the assemblage point, and we could.
Right.
We just finished doing like a study on this Dream Searchers book, which is Russian also, and they basically
Oh
are
boy.
talking about Castaneda. It's Castaneda the whole way. There's this great scene in here where they're kind of having the Morpheus sort of Neo moment, right? They're teaching this guy about dreaming and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and they're talking about, and they're just breaking down a bunch of the Castaneda stuff. For me, for whatever reason, I had a really hard time reading Castaneda. It just seemed like
Yeah.
this long story, and I was just exhausted. I'm like, give me the goods, bruh, and they're in here. But
Yeah.
a lot of this Russian stuff is very Castaneda influenced.
I would love to talk about Castaneda. I can talk about Castaneda a little bit. Now,
Okay.
there's a recent episode, I don't know if it's come out maybe this week or next,
Okay,
where
cool.
in one of the channelings with Quo, they asked about Don Juan is Don Juan legit? Did he really exist? And Quo said, it doesn't matter. It's the same as Jesus and the Buddha. Follow the lessons specifically. The lessons do have, that they can apply. And you always can question any lessons that you're getting. Is it talking about manipulating other people? But they almost say it's so advanced, take it slow. They take the Castaneda stuff slow. I have read some Castaneda on the channel. And then what's super fascinating is if there's been enough research done. Do you remember those old books, the Book of Lists? They used to have, and it was always like you open it up in the 10 tallest guys, or it was like a book of lists, and it was written in that. There's a woman that was one of the writers of those that ended up dating Castaneda, and she wrote about her experience with Castaneda, and she's asking the same question. And then there's I documented this when he disappears. There's people around him that sort of disappeared at the end of their lives, and there's a story where he goes in. Don Juan is guiding him to communicate with the other world and how these energy points without body, and he ends up bringing one of them into this world. It's a girl. And the story is it's like it's kind of, he learns how to become lucid in his dreaming, and then starts lucidly dreaming with these. But it's dangerous. The way that Don Juan says, you can get pulled into that world, and then your body is gone. You're gone. You're sucked into the world. And they try to they can't lie. The beings that he starts to talk with, they can't lie to him. They're just certain things they won't say unless you ask, right? And they want to get you into their world, and they take your energy, and so you sort of get an understanding of how it gets even more advanced, where they're talking about there are entities that sort of feed off of us at death, right? And it's all our past experiences. They're kind of like food for us, right? So what Castaneda would be teaching is something called recapitulation. He even went as far as to have you sit in like a coffin or something that resembled a coffin, and you go through your past your life, all the most ridiculous memories, in totally insignificant stuff, trying to recollect all these things back to you. And if you become whole enough, then you can travel on after this life if you've recapitulated. And so he has these stories where Don Juan is like, I want you to start going through your past memories. And he has this really memory. Castaneda tells it like in a novel form about interacting with somebody else, something he had done. And Don Juan says, you now need to give up and do everything in your life to make up for this. And if that means getting rid of all your possessions or everything, you need to do it. And so he goes through, it's part of his journey of understanding. And so there's some really powerful teachings in it, but I'm super fascinated because my interpretation of Castaneda is he is a conglomeration of a group of people that had Toltec teachings, a sort of secret society. He claims crazy stuff like Don Juan had met somebody that had lived since Atlantis, and that he would give he made deals with some of the shamans where he would give their energy and he would give them something else. And so some of these beings were walking the earth, living for long periods of time. And you don't know what to make of it, and some of it's fascinating. And but I remember reading the first Castaneda, and it's just this, randomly this dude ends up hanging out with this guy, this Indian. Next thing you know, he's doing some drug I haven't heard of, and it gets crazy, right?
Right.
So
right.
that's why it appealed to me so much when I was a kid, when I read that first book, right?
That's
Oh, wow.
crazy. Yeah, no, I mean, that is definitely an intriguing premise, Also sounds like the beginning of like a bad fairy tale or something,
Right. Right.
But no,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you 100% in that, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter where it comes from or if this guy was real
Right.
or a fraud or whatever, because people are so quick to jump on that train and just like disqualify someone's work, just because
So there's
of
something to the
personal.
teachings.
Yeah.
There's something to the teachings that are I think absolutely applicable, and don't get too caught up in whether or not it's true. You can test these teachings out,
There you go.
and then do what Quo always says. If it doesn't resonate with you, forget about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the idea is that we are all living in different realities. They're collections of realities. Your reality is a collection of your past experiences and everything that's going on, and you imagine each of them like a little, very invisible thread. If you understand physics and how things are connected, these threads connect to past other experiences and other realities, sort of defining your reality, and it all kind of gathers together like a ponytail on the back of our head.
Wow.
And then our heart is empowering it. And so if they, as John Wales says, if they can test the location of that assemblage point on somebody that's schizophrenic or that's going insane, a lot of times somebody's assemblage point gets shifted. There's these amazing exercises that he taught in one of his books, Magical Passes, that you do. If you watch it, you're going to start laughing. You can look it up on YouTube. Huh. They're all there.
Cool.
And there are these exercises that you do, and they're almost like a weird form of Tai Chi. If you look up the book Magical Passes, Carlos Castaneda, and the girls that are there also had claimed to have met Don Juan, but they never answered any questions when they were asked. And these girls also disappeared. There's one girl that's in the group that also wrote a couple books, and those are interesting too. She talked about her own experiences, but did not talk about Don Juan in those books. But they're in that video of doing the exercises, and they're shifting the assemblage point. It's literally a physical exercise to activate the plat, and right.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. That's
right.
That's what they're teaching in this book. They're teaching him about the assemblage point in this book, and talking to him about basically how we have sort of two awarenesses. And this goes into dream yoga as well. It links over into that, but Castaneda's work seems to be a little bit more in depth about it.
Right.
But like, think about two partitioned hard drives, right? Like, we're asleep and we remember all the because you're like, when you're in that dream state, you're like, of course I'm going to remember this. How could I not? Like, it's so real right now. And then you wake up and you forget about it, and then you come into this reality and you have this memory here. And so we sort of have these partitioned hard drives, and the whole point of this book is to basically undivide those two things so that we're able to use our whole awareness and open up that assemblage point. I think that is like the filter, like that reality tunnel. It's so determined by the position of that assemblage point.
Right.
And that's kind of how we, live, like you said. And I love the sort of like wires, or like the, information kind of coming out of the back of your head. That's crazy. And it's very matrixy.
One of the first meditations, if you look on my channel, it might not even cross 1,000 views. One of my first meditations, I did super highly experimental one because it tripped me out. And sometimes I think it's your guide, but if you think about, just start to observe the object behind you to the right and just sit there for a few minutes. It's weird. It's kind of crazy. There's something going on behind us outside of our awareness that we can't see. We can, like we learn in physics, observation collapses the wave to the particle. So there is a point behind us at all times, especially when we're in a room by ourselves, you know, where there's this sort of like black hole that's right there. It's kind of the gathering. It's the focal point where all the energies are. But if you sit and do that, just sit and just kind of observe behind you. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah, I mean that there's definitely something to that. You know, you can sense when someone's behind you and they're walking up. You know, you don't even hear
Right.
them, but you know somebody's, or if somebody's staring at you from behind. You know, you can just feel that piercing glance.
Right.
You know, and then turn around and. You know, I think have you ever read Eileen Day McCusick's book? It's called Electric Body, Electric Health.
I have not.
So it's a
Oh, I'm
pretty
so excited to get a new book to read. All right.
yeah, it's really exciting. Chance
Yeah.
Garton actually told me about it, and when I read it, I was like, "Oh wow, this one really ties some things together."
Yeah.
He's talking about electricity as energy and how sort of that whole schematic works, and I was like, "Wow, this would really make a lot of sense. It would tie, you know, so much together, you know, as far as how energy is working through us and in our bodies, and just exactly like what's going on
Right.
with this electromagnetic field that surrounds us. That's what she talks a lot about, and she uses tuning forks. I've never tried this, but I know some people who enjoy it, have had success with it.
Right.
But these tuning forks are like the information is also stored, like you're talking about coming out of the back, and then all around your EMF field, right? Like, and so if something's off balance, like one of your chakras, she goes through each and every chakra too, by the way, and talks about the different imbalances and how they can manifest in your chakra, you know, not being balanced, as well as in your biofield, because that's what all that information is broadcast in like a toroid around us, a toroid
Right.
field. It's really cool stuff, and yeah, I think you'll really enjoy that one, dude. That's cool.
All right. I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. I was able to really activate my plat when I started activating the Merkaba, when I started doing the Merkaba technique, or at least visualizing the two pyramids spinning, one to the left 34, then one to the right 21 times. There's a sort of like I could feel the there's a sort of ratio the way that Melchizedek does on his meditation. I found it very powerful. That was one. But you and I were both there for the beginning of the plate and plat or whatever. I'm team plat. So,
Okay.
but
Braid,
you know,
whatever.
right. And so, and we both reported that we felt it. You know, it's a fascinating thing. And so, part of me wonders: was this created? That was it? Did it not exist before, but now it's a thing, and it, you know, that's how things, or was that already there all along? You know, I get, you know, both could be true, right?
I think they could both be true. I think the more amount of energy and action that's impressed upon whatever that idea is, the more
Right.
powerful it gets. Like if we do a ritual that someone's been doing for 1,000 years, and it probably has a
That
little bit
yeah,
more power than.
I'm a big believer in that. When you study those old rituals and old magical phrases and words, when I'm doing the ritual or saying the phrase, I'm feeling a historical, energetic. This is not just me saying this; it's the history of every time anybody's ever said that in this manner. When you do a mantra really slow, like they do in some magical ceremonies, it's not about that it's magic because of the word. It's that it has a certain resonance with all of history. And so even when we say
Exactly.
the Lord's Prayer,
Right.
the Lord's Prayer is
Absolutely.
this collective energy that's attached to it, which is how I would argue with somebody that is atheist, that maybe has an understanding of science, why saying these things are still important, even if you don't believe the word
Sure.
itself, right?
Man, Ariel Gatoga does some amazing work. He's a witch, and he starts with the book of Psalms. He's like, Psalms is a spell book.
Yeah, no,
And
no. I got to do that episode. Psalms is a magical, the most magical part of the Bible. Why don't people know about it? There's a classic book that you can get that has different magical, say line three, and like white candles around the house, and when you start experimenting with some of these, it's amazing. So, yeah, I've wanted to do maybe a sleep meditation, just read Psalms. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it'd be awesome. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, he has them sorted out where he's like, this is the psalm for prosperity, or this is the psalm for, as a spell. Like read this particular one for this particular thing, and you can read it over and over, or however. But even as a witch and someone who I don't think he has any really connection or affiliation to Christianity or anything
Right.
at all. In fact, the idea of witching is like definitely frowned upon in the Christian church. But anyway, he's saying his point is that the most one of the most ancient spell books is that book.
It's
And
true.
so using those spells even first as a beginning witch. That's how you could start and actually see some effective results. But as we know,
It's
you know,
true.
we are the ritual anyway, so we can define it however we choose. But I do
Yeah.
think there's more power in certain, you know,
Yeah. You amplify the
established.
power by connecting to the spiritual realm within that word.
That's
The
right.
more and more. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And it's fascinating to me. So, there's been a lot. I just talked to Paul Selig. His first book, I Am the
Awesome.
Word, is amazing. And then you start to really think about the idea. The word is, it's really the key. I wanted to ask you that. Some competing systems, such as like transurfing, might say that affirmations. Uh, um, I think that affirmations are super powerful. Neville Goddard wasn't a big advocate, but then he contradicts himself and has some affirmations he'll pop out at some lectures. For me, I think it's one of the most important and powerful techniques because I can control my thoughts by using words. So everybody's a little different. What is your view on that?
I mean, I use whatever. I don't do a lot of like visualizations really as much anymore because I know
Hmm.
exactly what I'm going for. I'm taking the fortress by lengthy siege, so I'm not in any rush, and I'm just trying to enjoy the process literally as much as is humanly possible, you know, and that takes a lot of pressure off, right, and that importance and all that. But I do affirmations every day, and I don't do traditional ones. I actually took an image branding class last
Hmm.
year. This is like a lot of actors will take, right, to understand how people perceive of you. I did it for comedy. And so there are all these lines that are essence statements that they write for you. They're beautiful. I've never felt so seen. You know, I really,
Right.
really, really enjoyed the course. I got a lot out of it. And so I'll read those aloud every day. They're like, there's a power. And basically, this guy Sam Christensen, he was one of the biggest casting agents in Hollywood before he passed away. But his system lives on, and is called the Sam Christensen process. And so the
Hmm.
idea is to get a glimpse and understand how you come across to other people so that you can define that. And there's something about like, it's basically like it's Carl Jung stuff and Joseph Campbell stuff sort of mixed together. And
Yeah.
then a very creative expressions that are metaphorical to describe how you come across what your essence is. So that like, let's say that an actor had, you know, 10 different essences that they could range from in their character. And so they would maybe say one and then act a certain way in that tone. And then they would say another and then act a certain way in that tone. And these are
Yeah.
different ways that they kind of come across. So it was this beautiful, very human experience, right? Like we often talk a
Hmm.
lot about self-help and trauma and healing and all these kind of things. Those things are, of course, tremendously important. But there's this other aspect of just being human and the mystery that is like we're this, you know, infinite consciousness with, you know, weird parts, you know, with buttholes, and it's like that I'm
Right. Yeah.
yeah, you know, there's something
Exactly.
funny about that. It's
Yeah.
humorous, it's interesting, it's human, and it's beautiful in its own way. And so it's kind of helped me to sort of resolve that paradox and have a little bit of fun too. So my
Right.
affirmations are like, alone in the bathroom, working on my maniacal laugh was one. You know, like one of the essence statements that they wrote for me. Another one was extraordinarily regular. You know, like they
Oh,
had
that's
all
cool.
these different ones, right? And so I'll read those aloud
Yeah.
and just kind of, you know, just rest into my existence and allow it to be what it is and confirm it for other people. It helps me a tremendous amount on stage, right? Because I look like the friendliest bouncer. Like as soon as I acknowledge that fact, people kind of relax and they're like, "Yeah, he looks exactly like what I think he is," right? And so for me, I use affirmations in that sense, and then I
Hmm.
have some of my own as well that I will write down. But I think what you got to just find what works for you and just play and enjoy
Yeah.
that. You know, I used to visualize and imagine stuff so hard, and it was such a big deal. I would put tons and tons of excess energy and significance into it, right? Like
Hmm.
when I was a kid, I would fantasize grossly and idealize certain situations, and I still have the tendency to do that. So for me, visualization is something I have to actively back away from and just work on the feeling good part and not worry about and take the action, right? Like just feel
Hmm.
good and choose, take the action and just keep going.
Hmm.
And that's really where I try and live, because every day I'm learning more and more, and I've given myself some time to explore myself too, and I feel like I feel very rewarded, and like my inner child. This is a pretty LA thing to say, but like my inner child is like very happy with the time, right? Like for it to be able to come out and play and be seen and be advocated for,
Yeah.
So so I say that, all that to say, whatever works for you, give yourself the
Right.
time and attention. I like it quiet. I listen to less things. I listen to a lot more like music, instrumental music, and less, still listen to books and stuff and podcasts, but I'm a little bit more judicious about it at this
Hmm.
point, So for me, it's really about having that leverage over that reality tunnel and actively programming what's going on in my mind, and trying to put myself truly in the most creative position that I possibly can, because I'm still working on writing and, creating.
How do you navigate worrying all the time about paying your bills and getting your stuff taken? How do you navigate through that? Being what you do, it's constant change. You're always on a job interview all the time. It's constant change, right?
It really is. It can be very nerve wracking, but I've missed a payment here or there before, and
Yeah.
realized on the other side, been like, I missed a payment. I called them. I was like, hey, I'm going to be late. And they're like, oh, it's cool. I'll just put it in the system for you. And I'm like, oh, cool. Right. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. There's a lot of stress, especially with finances, and that I used to get. I would come undone. I would unravel,
Hmm.
at the first sign of like a bounced check. Well, bounced check. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
But the first sign of something, like, I would just completely come undone. But I've learned to just go with it. It's gonna be okay, and there's always another way to make money. One thing that I've learned is that if I have several different sort of ways to make money going on, then I'll forget, and then I'll get a check and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I did do that.
Hmm.
It's like I was emceeing for Dave and Buster's for a while and doing that, and then I got a job doing some production work, and then and so everything kind of, and the way that I deal with it is having multiple things to pay attention to, and that way if I get like a little bit too keyed up on one specific thing,
Yeah.
then I can take a break and just leave and come back to that, So I don't know. I've found what works for me, which is really just
Well, in your industry, you have to deal with certain kind of personalities, like hardcore narcissists.
sure.
How do you? These are people that will not leave you alone. You can't escape from them. You know what I mean? They seemingly feel like they treat it like a competition with you, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I know that we both have experienced this a little bit. I'd love to get your perspective on dealing with the narcissist.
Yeah, my only perspective is, and this is something that I overheard someone saying in comedy, is just like, how does it help you, right? Like whatever it is that you're about to do, like if I were to get upset about someone else, let's say getting picked for a show over me, or and they were not as good or whatever, right? Like all these
Hmm.
comparisons and analogies, it's like, what good does it do me to take an action, especially if that's negative on their part, or just like, not that there's anything wrong with venting or being upset about being treated unfairly. That's okay. I think you can acknowledge that, but at the same time, publicly or stirring up drama, what have you, being able to just relax in those moments and say, what is it? Oh, did we freeze up again? I'm
I
sorry.
could still hear you though
Okay,
the
cool,
whole
cool,
time.
cool.
So
But just how, what, when before I try, I don't always do this, of course, but I try before I take an action to be like, okay, how does this help me? And if it doesn't help me, then I try not to do it, like there's of
Right.
course that knee jerk, like, damn it, like, because there are people who will go out of their way just to spite you. I don't understand it. I don't understand why elites have wars and fight and put innocent people in jeopardy. Like, I don't understand that either. It doesn't make
But
sense to
you
me.
get people that'll publicly provably lying about you. You know what I mean? It's obviously lying about you in certain situations, and there's not much you can do about it, right?
Well, I mean, anybody can do that. And here's the other part of that. If someone is talking in a negative way about someone else to you, then I can promise you that they're talking about you to someone else negatively as well.
Exactly,
Because
that's true.
the truth of it is like, even though these things happen, you can kind of see people by their fruit and the way that they act. So if they're throwing people under the bus, like, just know that if they're throwing people under the bus, it's just not you. It's not because they're any, more concerned or any more
Yeah.
interested in your well-being, because clearly, that's not the case. And everybody is in it for their own benefit. There's just a lot of different strategies, right? Like,
But
that's
comedy sort of attracts that a little bit, right?
it really does, yeah. And there's a lot of subversive stuff, and people play jokes on you and prank you, and do things like that. Sometimes it's in jest and in fun, right? Like just busting balls after a show or whatever. But there are some definitely some real trauma and aggression and passive aggression and things like that can happen. That not, a lot of comedians are not very well. They're not healed either.
Yeah.
I would say the
I was
majority
talking to
aren't.
Brant Tobler, my I went to high school with, and we were talking. I got the idea that from what he would describe, you're almost like a pendulum vampire. You're feeding off the energy of the group, and it's like he has this certain ability. That's why he goes to a lot of football games. He means that he likes to be in big group events because he can just siphon some of that energy. Is there something to that?
There's definitely something to that in anywhere we are, and I don't know why, right? Like, I don't know why I
Right.
want to be the center of attention. I thought I should feel bad about that, right? Like, and that was a
No.
whole thing to go through.
Right,
but
of
it's
course.
but I enjoy it, right? And to me, like, I do a lot of purpose work, and my purpose is to bring joy to people. So talking about my taints or whatever, if that brings people joy, then that's great. I'll try to do that if I make a YouTube video or have you on a podcast or go to the grocery market or whatever. If I can just impart that little bit that I have into whatever activity it is, then I feel like it's purposeful in that way. So
I
to
like
me,
that. Yeah.
it doesn't matter what anybody else does. I could give two shits about what anybody else does. I
Right.
have no control over them. And if someone is adamant and talking negatively, like, whoever smelt it dealt it. I'll just say that, like like the person who is upset and making a big deal about things or accusing someone else, like, usually I would say they probably need to recapitulate, integrate, look within themselves, right?
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's
usually in those type of situations, the person accusing you is broadcasting what's going through their mind and what they've done before, right? So,
Yeah, the idea of imperturbability. I mean, it's certainly easier said than done, but
oh, it's hard. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
When you're put in that situation, it's human nature. You're instantly going to react.
sure.
Um, yeah,
Especially you're like, hey, what the hell, man? Like,
right.
I didn't even do anything to, but there are just those people, and I think ultimately, they're working toward their own ends. They're just employing a strategy that
Right.
is really kind of the opposite of
Any
um,
level of opposition you put towards it or energy towards it always comes, always works against you too.
it
It,
doesn't.
it,
Yeah,
it's you have to just let it go.
it seems to be a waste of time.
It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
only thing you can really do is let it go. But there's that part of you that says, I can't just let this go.
I know.
Right. I
It's
can't just
so
let this go. Right.
absolutely. Yeah, it's so funny too. I've been working on a bit just about being a life coach, and it's mostly kind of a silly bit about,
Yeah.
subverting the power or whatever, but just talking about, like, we don't all, just because I'm a life coach, it doesn't mean I have all my poop in a group, like we all are learning and evolving and getting better, and I make a silly point about that, but the idea is that we're all encouraging each other and strengthening each other instead of trying to tear each other down. The way I can see it, you've got two ways to use your energy. You could try to tear somebody else's, burn their ship, or you could work on building yours. And I mean, if my ship gets burned down in the process of building it, well, I've already built one, so I'll just build another. There's an old story about Bill Hicks when, what is the guy's name? It's not Dennis Leary. Dennis Leary came out. Mm-hmm. He put out his first special, and Bill Hicks had the tape and apparently played it for his brother. And his brother looks at him and he goes, "Oh my God, Bill, that's your act." And Bill Hicks ejected the tape, threw it out the window, and just wrote a new hour. Because he just wanted to hear the confirmation that he was being stolen from.
Right.
And then he just went back and did the thing. It's like there's that, I think it's a Joe Dispenza story where he goes to meet his mentor or whatever. His mentor sits down at the table and he goes, "I just lost everything I have. Pass the ketchup." Like
right.
There's no big deal, like back to the finance thing. He's like, "I am money." You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need money. I am money. And once you've learned to do something, once you've learned a skill, even if somebody comes and burns down the village, like if you built those houses, it can be done again and probably better and more efficiently. So, it's one of those things where over so much time, like I've learned patience probably in the hardest way because I've been a very impatient person. And so I've
had some amazing episodes that I recorded and they got messed up because the equipment I was using was bad or there was some sort of feedback. And I had learned that, I did it once, just do it again. You know what I mean? And sometimes it ends up being better. Right. So, but accepting that, just like I could sit and just freak out about it that I had spent it's not going to work towards my advantage in any way. Right.
Right. Exactly. Right. Like, how does that help you? How does it help us to basically, like my friend James says, like worrying is praying for what you don't want, like
right.
why do it? Now, if you're working through some trauma and stuff, of course you need to face those feelings and understand where they came from and do those types of things. But, all things said and done, right? Like the idea is to clear that stuff out, recapitulate, integrate, and then there's more capacity to feel even better and you have more of an ability to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think those are all just challenges. The narcissists are there to teach us just like everything else.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's tough. I've been through some weird stuff as far as like the humiliation soul wound goes, man. And that may have a lot to do with me choosing the path that I've chosen.
Do you think it's like an epidemic? Like it spreads like a virus that narcissism does? It just spreads. It's not necessarily that person is a narcissist. It's a phenomenon that's spreading. It's sort of gathering like a virus,
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think, if we look at social, the struggles in different cultures and the toxicity that is just being propagated there, that's just very blatant and, not virtuous. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between virtue and empowerment. There's a big difference between those two things. And so a lot of those things are just being pushed. And I think it's a social kind of thing. We know how sort of pendulums work. It's not that there's some mastermind pulling every string, but the energy in motion, it does carry. And
it becomes a phenomenon like a tornado. Exactly. It's not thinking, but it is what it is. You have to be aware of it.
I think fortunately too, it's so overtly in our faces that it kind of forces people to almost question more and be like, okay, wait a second. This seems a little bit like, I'm being conned or something, or this doesn't seem fulfilling, or this doesn't seem right. And that's why I think more people watch stuff on YouTube than they will on the mainstream news platforms and stuff, because
right.
they're just more, they want
the wall is not there between the people producing and then watching. It's real.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have even known the Oscars happened if, Will Smith didn't smack
Chris Rock in
the face, like for instance. And
right.
That's the point we're at. But I have learned also, and it's kind of fascinating to me, that where people's attention does go is controversy, conflict, those pendulums, right? That seek that higher and higher oscillation, that higher and higher conflict, that seek the more conflict, that seek the more conflict. People's attention does seem to go there. That's why Facebook does their algorithm the way they do, where
but temporarily. So if somebody, for instance, wants to get attention for their channel and they create conflict on purpose to get attention, they'll get a little spike in attention, but then then it's over. It's only temporary. It happens when it happens organically, and it doesn't seemingly feel like it's not authentic. It carries a little more momentum, but you see people trying to game the system by creating conflict, like in some reality shows and different scenarios.
right.
I've even seen it in rap, like they create a beef just so they can have a diss track.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like something when it's not authentic, we can tell. You know what I mean?
It's true. Yeah.
We're getting gamed. Before, I don't think we were aware that we would just get sucked right into it, right?
Absolutely. I think definitely we are more aware. It's just so obvious. And like you said, I think the Buddha says something like the evil man doesn't think the fruit will spoil of his deed, like when he does that deed or whatever. It's that mentality. It's like, oh, well, I just need a quick hit of, attention or conflict or whatever that is. And yeah, you get a little bump, but like, that's it. You're going to taper off. And then if you keep doing that type of behavior, then people are eventually just going to get tired of it anyway. How many times can you?
You're also putting yourself in that energy field of conflict. If, and there is an energy field of it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I think slow. Nobody wants to hear it because we all want immediate manifestation, and
I just couldn't. Dave Chappelle's show, I couldn't believe that it happened again.
Right.
That whole story is still like I don't think they charged him, right? I think they took care of that themselves. Right?
Well, at least
they knew they weren't going to charge him. They were like, we'll take care of it ourselves, right?
I have to send you this thing Roy Woods Jr. did on how to defend yourself.
I saw it.
Oh, did you see it?
Oh my God, that's so hilarious, right?
Yeah. Self-defense for stand-ups. Oh man, that was so funny.
I had a dream, obviously influenced by what's going on, like where I was up on stage and something like that happened.
Wow.
Somebody came up. And how do you react? You're also presenting yourself on stage with everybody else, but you got to defend yourself, So what do you do, right?
Yeah, I think you go with one of
it's symbolic of. I mean, it's symbolic of a change that's happened in our culture that people would even consider doing that. With Will Smith, it was like the ultimate example of self massacre, like the ultimate like absolute destruction of yourself in public. I mean, he's lost movies, everything, all the stuff that's happened was going to be obvious. And all the people that were saying, oh, this was staged. I promise you this was not staged, because Will Smith has lost a ton. If you're following the trades, a ton of money, movies that have been canceled. Right. So, absolute self-massacre.
Sued too by Chris Rock.
Right.
On top of that, man. Yeah, that was wild.
I give credit. I mean, I could see the credit. I could go into the comedic mind when you're in that moment, and all these people that you're like, you're if you're doing a show at the Academy Awards, it's not like just doing a show. You're freaking talking to the most famous people in your industry in the world. Like, Beyonce is right there. So you're nervous as hell. There's no way to avoid it. Chris is just going to say the first funny thing that comes to his mind. He was barely thinking. It wasn't just a personal thing. It was, nerves. Sometimes you go for the easy joke, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a complimentary joke.
Right.
Demi Moore is smoking hot.
Right. Smoking hot. Right. But on. In comedy, you don't have time to wait. You have to say the joke.
Right.
There's no delay. You have to say it right there.
Sure.
So sure. Chris Rock had to face the consequences of being in like an unwinnable situation, right? Because he can't stay silent there. He has to say something. Yeah. So you're on the moment. What are you going to say? Right. Right. Yeah. So.
I don't know, but I mean, I would have expected something a little bit more spicy. But then again, after, there was nobody there to kind of watch out for it happening, because you're exactly right. It's not like you're in some club and, the lower east side or whatever,
Right.
and there's a bunch of drunk, angry New Yorkers at the back of the room throwing bottles or something, getting wild. It's not like that. You're literally in front of the most elite people. It seems
in the world, right?
Yeah.
These are famous people that you just a single one of them, you'd be all crushed being around in
Right.
person, right? You like barely be able to talk, right? And they're all looking up at you. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's just, it's using those energies. And I think that is always kind of a sign of desperation. It's, trying to stir up controversy or conflict. It's like you're needy for approval or attention if you have to do that. And I think that's where Hollywood is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that strategy. The more people that do that and it backfires and doesn't work, because again, how does it help you? Like, let's say you do that and you get ahead once. Well, whoever you screwed over in order to get yourself to that next position, they may slingshot you, or they may have friends who are ahead of you or whatever. And that it eventually, the fruit spoils, the bad fruit, it doesn't stay ripe forever. So, it's just, I think it's about just relaxing into just being yourself and letting people who have those types of agendas or enjoy that type of energy find it from somewhere else as much as possible. I mean, it is tough, but I think it's part of the growth, part of the lessons. I don't understand it all. I don't understand a lot of stuff, but I know that ultimately following that intuition and the practice like you're talking about, that's really ultimately what really matters. And then and going toward what we want and what we want to share with other people and how we care to serve the world, through whatever force or intention that we have behind us. And I think there is something there, right, that we're connecting to, where people aren't getting on a plane because they feel like, no, this is not. And maybe it's not always so evident, but I think that voice is in everyone, like that connection. It's there, and that's the choice ultimately, is like, are we going to listen to our intuition, or are we going to sort of live out here? Right. And, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to share.
I just want to thank you for all the stuff you've been doing. You've been doing so many awesome episodes, and I'm following you from the last time we did our interview on my channel. You've done so much, and you got a couple books on Audible right now. Yep. So, and you're one of my favorite audiobook narrators.
Well, likewise, man.
Definitely one of my favorite. No, I mean, I model myself after your style, you know what I mean? And so everybody needs to check those out. Those are great. I think those are under Owen Hunt, right?
Yeah, I think I have it under Bootsy Greenwood.
Is it under Bootsy Greenwood?
Yeah, right. I think it's under both. I just put both my names there because I'm sure there's another Owen Hunt co-written out there somewhere. So I did Bootsy Greenwood and Owen Hunt, and then the publishing is just Blue Collar Mystics, so the publishing company. And so I can help other people with their audiobooks as well if they're interested in learning how to do that, or yeah, I'm just excited to be able to share and writing and creating and continuing to move forward and learn more about comedy and my own spiritual process and everything, all this curious stuff that we can't help ourselves from digging into, dude. Thank you so much.
Keep up the great work, man. I appreciate it.
Likewise, man. Likewise. I appreciate it. It's nice to have and be supported and connect with people like
it's been too long, man. Next time we won't make it as long, all right?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Man, that's awesome. I appreciate it, my friend. Thanks, everybody. Be sure to check Brian's channel out. I got links in the description if you're not already subscribed. And we'll talk to you soon, my friend. Bye, everybody.